camera, whichever you like. Okay.
The recording has just started, and before we get any further, I've pasted a few URLs into the chat, including the running notes if you'd like to add anything about your own entry or anything else, please feel free.
Thank you. So welcome to this meeting of the Ecma TC54-TG2 for the Perl standardization. As a reminder to everyone, we're subject to the code of conduct, which is the same as the one of the Perl project and CycloneDX and Eclipse and the TC54, generally speaking. It's available online. I'm going to paste a link in the chat so there's no ambiguity there. And I'm sure we'll all be, as usual, good to each other. We have in the chat a running meeting notes document as a Google Docs that will be eventually posted online, committed to the repo. You're welcome to add agent entries and your name and affiliation for reference. And the first item of business, going to review the last meeting minute for the last call, which was a month ago. Yeah, we skipped a bit actually. We used to meet normally once every 2 weeks, but we skipped a bit with I guess May Day. It was a holiday for a lot. There were a lot of folks not around. I've pasted the meeting minutes for the last call, which was April 11th. And if there's no objection, we'll consider these meeting minutes accepted. There you go. All right, then let's do a quick roll call to discuss the topic for today. Matt, do you want to bring something to the agenda?
Nope, just here to monitor.
Great. Daniel, you want to bring something to the agenda?
I do not have anything in mind to discuss today.
Okay, great. Michael?
Well, I'd like to, sorry, got some hay fever here. I think we should talk about schedule a bit. Now we don't have one and we should have one.
Fair enough. John, things you want to bring up?
Nothing in particular, Philippe.
Okay, and on my side, I'd like to make sure we look a bit at the status and the progress we're doing towards the 1.0 spec and other topics of interest around the work taking place on the repo. Let's start with the schedule, Michael.
Okay. Well, we don't have a schedule. I have created a draft document that I'll put in the chat. Where's the chat?
Every tool has different one.
Yeah. And this should be accessible publicly. So based on various conversations and background, my understanding is that our best opportunity for formal approval.
This is not public, Michael.
I'm sorry?
The document in question is not publicly available.
If you have a link, it should be.
I've clicked the link and I cannot access that.
Let me try it again. Ugh. Excuse me, but I do hate. Okay, sorry.
No, that's
Google
okay.
Drive. Only people with access can open it. Okay, anyone with the link.
Thank you.
And yeah, I guess you have to do it one by one in some cases. Okay, can you get to that now? Well, give me a second.
Yeah. Yes, I'm in.
Okay.
I'm in.
Anyway, based on various inputs, it seems to me, my understanding is that the December General Assembly of the Ecma is
Mhm.
scheduled for, I've got it in here somewhere. December, where is it? December 15th or middle of December, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, December 10th and 11th. And it'd be helpful to get more. There's a meeting in June, but June 25th, 26th, that's on page 5. I don't think we're going to make that.
No,
December
not-
10th to 11th is our target, which should be our target. My understanding of the process is kind of, you have to have all your ducks lined up and ready to go. And then this is a kind of a final approval.
Yeah.
And so at the very least, we'd need to be pretty much done 2 months ahead of that. 1 month for community review and 1 month for Ecma review. Those are just estimates on my part. And I think that's actually, we don't want to wait that long. So I would like to see a way to target end of June actually as getting the final draft ready,
Mhm.
and then use Q3. Hopefully there will be some intrepid volunteers to try and implement this, either by implementing changes in existing implementations or other work that's going on, so we can at least get some feedback, good or bad, within that quarter, and then have a real final proposal ready for essentially Q4, right? If you're backing into mid-December, then that means October, November is pretty much should be set up for approval and more formal processes. So anyway, that's my general proposal. I still have some work to do in this document, but and put in a little more of a schedule. But that's, I think, would be a reasonable approach.
I hate self-imposed time schedule, but this is very reasonable, and we need that anyway. So I'm in favor, knowing that actually one thing you've missed is not so much only community feedback, but also presenting that formally to the TC54 for approval. One, it's been approved by the TC54 as a plenary, then it goes to the Ecma General Assembly.
Right. Right, but I'm suggesting that we try to wrap the basics up now, and that gives us a quarter to refine it with essentially right now we've got a lot of elements in flux, or a lot of items that are still being worked on, and so I think once you get a version 90 or whatever you want to call it out there, then you can solicit a different type of feedback.
Yeah.
And also, we want to surface feedback where people haven't really been engaged, and because they're waiting for this to settle down and then come back. And of course, in some cases, you can predict that it will be retreading things we've already discussed, and then that'll be a test for our FAQs and all those sorts of things to have the explanation. So anyway, that's a general proposal. It's not the hard dates are going to be set for the Ecma process, but the year is going quickly. So I'll update this document in a little more detail, but that's the general idea. And then the second thing in here is in this document is setting those dates for the core Perl standard, which would include the standard for Perl types, not the Perl types themselves, but the standard for what it takes to define a Perl type, and the whatever the process is going to be, and terminology for registering a Perl type, or I don't know what terminology we want to use, but there's a lot of requests for Perl types. And there are a lot out there already, and we have to have, we have to get that in place. And I think that means we should be working on the software infrastructure for recording that information, which could then, potentially change if there's some changes to the final draft spec, but nevertheless get to work on that. Because, so for example, moving from the current document, which is hard to check with all the data, to the JSON structure. I know Steve's proposed something, but
So it's still in flux. I don't know where Steve stands. He's not joining here, but yes, the goal is to have to evolve each type to be a small JSON document, a small structured document. Maybe we'll go with YAML, but the point is it has a structure, it has a schema, and then
And
it's easy to parse. Eventually, we could
Right.
use that to generate test suites
Right.
from tests prevented there. We could use that even to go as far as generate parsers and validators, or enhanced parsers and validators because it's structured. So definitely. So I don't. If Steve is not able to finish the work he started there, we can, John and I can grab
Yeah,
the and I think it's really important, because otherwise right now the problem I see also is that there's a lot of artistic freedom in expressing a type, which is wonderful, except it doesn't help. You know, somebody says, oh, use this default repository here and do this because of that. So when I'm reviewing these PRs, and I'm trying to review a couple every week or put some chimes, it's a bit painful there.
well, we got. I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that is
not helpful.
Right. So what are the required fields, if any? Right. What are optional fields?
Yeah.
In this definition of a type, you have to, is obviously it's desirable to have a software implementation around that type, but that may or may not be the case. That seemed to be kind of harsh to require an implementation before you can register a Perl type. Getting the FAQ, getting the background information, which doesn't have to be in the spec, but needs to be available at the same time. That this as with Perl in general, right? It's just not a government compliance type operation here. It's saying, if you want your Perl to be recognized by the tools, then you want to register it, right? If you want to invent some Perl that nobody will understand, that's the free speech part of this, right? So if somebody wants to create a Perl, I've seen in the past, called Windows, I don't think we'd register that if it doesn't have any logic to what it actually means versus the NuGet type or other types. But nevertheless, we need to be clear about that, because there will be differences of opinion.
Yeah.
And also we have to figure out there's some tickets out there. What do we do in the case of an ecosystem where are there multiple Perl types for an ecosystem? I suppose that could happen. I think there's some stuff going on with Go. Anyway, these are all things that we need to resolve. So I think the technical part is probably not too difficult, particularly get started. But anyway, I would argue that's in scope for the December.
Completely.
And then on the document,
I pasted the link to the draft PR from Steve, by the way, which is not, we've discussed already. It's not in the shape anywhere close to be merged. Especially it has some regex validation that we absolutely don't want to have in this form for the kind of worms. But at least just to give a feel for how it looks like. So yes, it's completely in scope there. By the way, just a side note on this topic also is when is a Perl type, a new Perl type, okay? There's really two ways to think of it, and that's more of a community discussion and an Ecma standard discussion, by the way. One is to say, we have a very low barrier, which is maybe okay. But the risk, if we have a very low barrier, is that we start to have weird stuff. Case in point, right now, there's a pending PR from GitHub staff to have a new type, which would be called GitHub release, which would be a way to point to the artifacts that may be attached to a tagged release in a GitHub repo. And on the surface, it looks fine. The problem is that, one, it's a new type. Second, there's no way for me to distinguish that a tarball comes from GitHub release or any other place. I mean, there's nothing obvious when I look at the tarball. There's nothing obvious when I look at a repo that it's a repo, but at least you have a remote that can give you a hint. So that's an example of potentially two types for very related things. And I probably would want to steer that to say, no, a release is, in this case, a downloadable artifact is a file. You enforce that files are unique within a release. Therefore, you may be able to use a regular GitHub Perl and just add a qualifier, which is standard qualifier for file name. Maybe something a bit extra with qualifiers, which will be very unambiguous, but avoiding the inflation of new types. Because otherwise, it's very easy to get new types. And all of a sudden, the poor of us on the receiving end, when we'll have to implement that, will just be crying by saying, "Oh, which one do I
Well,
use?"
and it can create confusion. So I'm just, but
Yeah.
again, we have to have fair-minded criteria, and we have to think about how to resolve, disagreements, and also possibly in other contexts such as SPDX namespaces. There's been a concern about namespace squatting, or Perl squatting, and so on. Well, you have to think about ahead though, about how are we going to approach that? And so what if, for instance, on read the docs, they have a confliction or a deconfliction process. So if someone, we ran into this with about code early on, and somebody had just used the name and did nothing with it. And there was a process they had for saying, okay, we're going to transfer that to you because you've actually got something going, and this other thing was just an empty entry. I can't remember what the entry is. Anyway, I'm just saying those are all things that need to come into play.
Yeah. And these are likely things I don't want to see in the Ecma spec.
No, they're guidelines, but
and guidelines on
right.
the
They have to be published at the same time, right? So the structure of the documentation in general needs to be part of this effort, right? Because if it's not in the spec, where is it, and how do we approach it? The last thing was in my proposal, I'm saying, it would be great to get VERS in December, but that's less urgent, and it's more urgent to get Perl and Perl types, and that we can think of VERS being on its own timeline, which isn't to say there hasn't been a ton of work on it, but it'd be great to get it in. But I think we'd want to keep the focus on the core Perl and the Perl type registry, for want of a better word, as the key ones. And it does take time to get these through, and also hearing from Steve and Kolek and so on. It's just for many of us, the standard setting process and the need for stipulated review cycles is a slower process than we're used to. So we really need to get ahead of this instead of assuming we can catch up at the end.
I kind of like somehow the silent consensus thing, but it feels a bit harsh to say, hey, if you don't speak up within.
Well, what else? Yeah, but that's an important question, Philippe. What is the governance? I don't know of a better one.
Okay, so let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
But we also can't have liberum veto. So I have previously.
No. So let's do it. I'm a punk, and let's leave the punk part of me away.
Well, but the hard part with lazy consensus, I don't know the details of how it's operated, is what do you do if you have a single malcontent? So in the 15th century, the Polish parliament pretty much fell apart because they had a rule that any one member of the parliament, called the Sejm, could veto everything. And it got to the point where people would do it, and then they jump out a window and get on a horse to escape everybody who's mad at them. So we can't have the liberum veto scenario where just one person who's unhappy for whatever reason is able to veto it. So I don't know how that works in lazy consensus. And
we can very simply adopt the ways of CycloneDX. They're simple, they're proven. Right. They may not be perfect, but at least they're known quantity and they're written down. So
right. So again, we have so to me that would be something we have to. That would again be something to get everything organized as best the core people think, get it done by June 30.
Yeah.
And then, that Q3, in addition to being a test cycle, would be a lazy consensus period, and we get used to using it. So give ourselves plenty of time for how that works. But there's clearly a method to it that's working reasonably well for CycloneDX. I don't have any other better proposal.
That's unless there's an objection there, we need to bring that up to the community anyway. I like that. That's cool.
Right. So
a bit more red tape and a bit more timelines and formalities.
boy,
That's-
yeah, but you got to have that for this. But anyway, we need to get the word out because what we don't
I
want
don't
is,
disagree.
if you're in CycloneDX world, you should be aware of this lazy consensus, and it would be unreasonable to say, well, I didn't know about that and whatever. But in our world, if we need to implement that by the concept by June 30, because otherwise, it might be reasonable. People say, well, we didn't understand how that was going to be proved, right? We just thought you guys would keep having meetings forever.
Yeah. Okay. So let's, if you don't mind, actually posting an issue, just suggesting this improved governance and the process we're gonna adopt, and maybe relate and or copy whatever document there is in CycloneDX in the repo, so everybody can relate to that. And then we leave until mid-June, so we have roughly months plus for everyone and we can reach out to everyone that's been active to make sure they're aware of that. So that would be nice and gentle, and not too brutal for anyone there. Cool.
Okay.
Awesome.
So there's one other section in this draft that needs a little work, but I'm generally proposing about projects and milestones, that we actually do create projects for the core Perl spec, for the verse spec, the Perl types, but that we move to using milestones for the actual tracking. So projects in GitHub are nice for the visual side of it, but as you move towards a software model, that you would really want to have a milestone. So we've done some of that work, but we haven't really, and I've been working with John on that, but we haven't really agreed on an approach. But I would think there should be a milestone for instance, for the core Perl spec, there should be a milestone for the final draft, a milestone for the final 1.0, and a milestone for whatever comes next. And that way you could start putting the tickets on a timeline, and then still display them in the project, but that, the project doesn't have that. You can put dates in the projects, but they don't have the same easy look that you get with milestone, because milestone says, here's how many are open, here's how many are closed, and so on. So I don't know if that's controversial, but I think that's something we want to discuss. And
that works.
John and I can work on that to create those. So use the best tool for the job, but
exactly.
It's a little confusing because they're overlapping tools.
Yeah,
but I think
in earnest, and I'm sure some of the users of other tools won't disagree. Maybe Daniel, you probably won't disagree, but in earnest, I think GitHub features, generally speaking, for project management and issues is very quickly bursting at the seam and a bit weak. The ones from GitLab is much more polished, especially when you start dealing with larger aggregates, multiple projects, and things like that.
Yeah, but GitHub and the sub issues has been very, very helpful.
It's a bit more refined. But yeah.
Yeah, it takes time to put a structure, and I find like I start putting numbers on tasks in the top of the title to help them display better in the project. Anyway, we'll start working on that. So I'm interested in any comments on this sort of high level plan. But the key part is if we agree on a June 30 to get the final draft done, and then Q3 for a overall review cycle, including testing, and then reserve Q4 for the formal processes that need to happen, then we should have a pretty good timeline to get this thing done this year, which is pretty critical.
Yeah. Any objections, comments on these topics? Daniel, Matt, John?
I'm coming in at the 11th hour, so certainly don't want to disrupt anything. I think that there will be a lot for me to catch up on over the next few weeks, but I also think I have some bandwidth to do that. So I'm looking forward to rolling up my sleeves here.
Great, awesome. Feel free also to join. We have every other week community meeting on Wednesdays at I think it's 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, and 6 p.m. Central European time, where we have, it's not recorded there, we have we take minute, but we don't record. It's less formal and more relaxed. And the goal there is really to discuss specific technical topics. Go ahead, John.
But at the last meeting, there was a discussion and a tentative approval that we would be recording that meeting going forward. I don't have a particular preference one way or the other, but it would alleviate my need to run the Google Meet and take notes and look at documents all at once. But whatever that you guys want is what we'll do.
I'm fine. I have no objections to recordings. Yeah. So one thing, Michael, about Verse, it would be great if we can get something effectively moved and approved for the same batch of Ecma in December. The spec is already integrated in the OASIS CSCF anyway. It's integrated. It's. I mean, the Verse is already part of CycloneDX and CSCF. So I feel that we have to do something so it's formally kind of a 1.0 by the end of the year, even if that's a bit of a stretch goal. Just because of that, because like you have standards that are looking at that, and then on top of that, CV.org is considering to adopt Perl as an equal to CPEs or an alternative to CPEs for their records. And that would imply also using Verse for version ranges for that. And
version ranges in the Perl or version ranges as a qualifier?
Version range as in Verse version range, whether I will not promote using that as a qualifier. They can if they want to, but that's overloading. They have structure.
But how do you use, how can you put a range of, okay, so that's a very big conceptual problem for me. I don't understand the concept of ranges inside the as the version inside a Perl, because a Perl is a package.
We can take that separately. We can take that offline if you want on the next community meeting. But the whole point is there's been discussion there, and at least for the purpose of this meeting, I think it's important that we can move forwards towards a standardization on the accelerated track, if possible, because of Cyclone, CSCF, and then potentially CVE.
Well, I wasn't trying to slow it down. One thing was trying to separate it out, but I guess I just really don't understand the Verse as I always thought it was a qualifier thing for dependencies and such, and how you express that.
No, definitely not. We can have a separate discussion.
Yeah, we can have a separate discussion, but
the next meeting if you want.
I find it confusing. So personally,
maybe what I suggest, I'll do a 5-10 minutes presentation, formal presentation on Verse on the next Ecma call. So you have the information for reference, and we can discuss it in the community call too.
Right. Well, that would be important, because I think then if you're, guess is where they interact. If that's the case, then it seems that just defining a Verse, how Verse works for a Perl type would be very important, right? Because some Perl types it's going to work and someone isn't. So that it would end up being an important question. As far from what I've understood, is it, Verse is it covers a lot of bases, but it does nothing can cover every base. So
no, completely.
So, okay.
And so the CV.org quality working group reached out to me. I've participated in a couple of meetings with them. So did Steve. I know there were a lot of discussion around Perl at VolCon, but I was not there. I don't know if Matt or Daniel, you were there or participated in VolCon. I was not. I've discussed a couple of days ago with folks from GitHub that sits on the CV board also on this topic. It's on their radar. They're waiting for the CV quality working group to actually come with a decision to see how they will adopt it also in their GitHub advisory database and all that. So there's a lot of good vibes, and eventually I want to make sure we're if there's delays, hopefully they won't come too much. That would be, let's hope will not be because of us.
Well, I mean, so part of having a more structured plan is hopefully we can say by June 30 that, you know, also to these groups, here's the final draft, version 1.0, and get us your feedback in the next month or two so that we have that, right? Again, that grace period, but it can be something to present to people as a more complete standard than what we have now, which is still, you know, trying to resolve lots of tickets and Perl PRs and stuff like that, right? So at that point, those should either be, you know, resolved or on their way to resolution in 1.0 or move to some other future release. And that is another question that we need to talk about at the high level is what's our release strategy? So, you know, do we really, how quickly do we expect major revisions? I mean, it's speculative, but, you know, CycloneDX has a pretty much an annual cycle for a while. And that probably isn't needed, but, you know, it's important to sort of set expectations about that too, because we need to learn from SPDX and this, you know, idea that people get it right on a 1.0 and, you know, nobody implemented SPDX 1.0. So obviously Perl's different shape because people have already implemented it, not waiting for 1.0. But anyway, we should have some idea of what are the time horizons that we.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I like to think about timelines when it comes to software instead of the same way Paul Masson has been advertising its wines in the US in the 80s with Orson Welles, you know.
Yeah.
We sell no wine before it's time.
Yeah. Here's $100. It's time. Yeah. Of course, $100 is actually just now the either average or the median price of a bottle of wine from Napa, where I live. So anyway,
except for
times
the
have changed.
chuck, the $2 chuck is no longer $2, right?
And it no longer they actually that winery I think has stopped producing.
It went under. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Segue on wines.
Okay, so we'll have
recorded.
So I don't know. Do you want to do that community meeting or this meeting about the BRRS? Because I think we should present that.
Let's address it first next week in the community meeting.
Okay. I just want
and we can make a presentation the week after also in this meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've taken up enough time anyway. So all these topics are covered at a high level in the document. I'm happy to get comments and edits, and I'm going to keep working on it. And just in general, we have as you can see, there's some hiccups, but we have a G drive set up under About Code for public documents. And the idea is that some things like this kind of more general document don't really fit very well into issues, and the commenting system in issues becomes hard to follow versus commenting in a doc. So these are intended to be, you know, short-term documentation. Eventually all of it goes into some more formal mode, so into issues and so on. But right now it's trying to give some people can read on 3 or 4 pages rather than scrolling through 12 or 15 issues. So
as long as everything is open access, doesn't even require authentication, I'm fine.
Yeah, so our default that we've been implementing there is that anyone who has the link can access it. So we're not publishing it for robo scrolling, but anyone who has the link can access it in commenter mode. That's what I've set as the permissions. So I think that should work, which is pretty much what I think most other open source projects do when they use something like Google Docs.
Yeah. There's an interesting thing which is open source, which is done by a French open source company, by the way, which I use at times, which I paste the link. It's called CryptPad, and you can self-host it. It's a bit like a kind of a better version of EtherPad, and it doesn't have all the bells and features of Google Docs, but at least you can do minimally collaborative editing of documents, and everything is encrypted. So I found it interesting. It's a prop for some buddies that manage that stuff. It's a decent open source, interesting thing. Okay, let's move to let's move to the review on the progress on the spec. So lots of activities, and I think we're not treading water in the sense that we're closing some issues and closing some PRs, but there's more that coming in, so it's not leaky buckets, but it feels a bit like it. We're at the moment at 100 and wow, okay.
I think we're over 200.
Shit, yes, we're over 200 combined issues and PRs. So we're working hard at it, but it's still there. Let me share my screen to make sure we're all looking at the same thing together. And there's one thing I want to look at, which is really a critical one, which is the PR on character encoding, which is this PR here, number 461. And as usual, there's a lot of discussion. We have in 2 weeks over 40 comments combined. It's important because there's been so many confusion on character encoding. I think John and I worked and had a lot of sessions to refine that, looked at each of the feedback and comments, decided which one to consider, which one to discard. We are reaching a stage where we have something. I know you've pushed the latest version.
I pushed it last night, and Piotr has given us an approval already. So we just need one. I mean, nobody else has commented yet, so we want to give time hopefully for Matt Donahue and Martin and Jan, and I hope others as well. Daniel and Matt.
Key change in this PR, so everybody understand, and Matt, you're always looking for accurate regex level representation of the different parts, so you'll appreciate the effort there, hopefully. Eventually towards BNF grammar, but we've defined this class of permitted characters with giving it names, capitalized this way, and that way we can reuse this name afterwards. We're defined this section of Perl separators already exists. We just made it more prominent, moving it from down to there. And then we have this session, which is the character encoding session, which is really the essence of character encoding. And what we're doing here is essentially booting to RFC 3986 on percent encoding. So RFC 3986, if you don't know, Daniel, is this RFC around URIs. So we're booting to this section, which has its problem, but it's a well-known quantity. It's been out there for 20 years, and it's eventually implemented in tools. And we're defining as clearly as possible, using on purpose the same terms as defined in the RFCs to say how it relates to our character class. And so I don't want to dive too much into details, but we're reaching a stage where we as John said, we have folks that have been reviewing that frontward, backward, and we're all nitpicking on the commas and the T's. And we already have an approval of one of these very careful, detail-oriented reviewers, which is great. We are likely to get a couple days of extra review on that before it's merged. The point is that with this section on encoding here, let me zoom out so you can see the part here, which is not very long, right? It's these 3 sections here. Once this is merged, as I said 2 weeks, or it was a month ago now, but once this is merged, pretty much the bulk of ambiguities in the spec are less ambiguous, or hopefully going away, and we'll be able to address either positively or reject many pending pull requests that are dealing with this, saying, hey, this is the lay of the land now. We've discussed that, and here's how you do encoding. Now, we have a plan in the months ahead to also work out with each of the Perl authors, the Perl library authors, to make sure we can help them. I mean, literally coding if need be, and enrolling folks in the community to help with the code to update these libraries to make sure they can match the latest and greatest spec. And to me, that's important. That's maybe a bit atypical of how standards would work. We may get some help and some funding from some government to actually do that work, which is great if it happens. In all cases, as a community, I think it's important that we can go and help keep everyone on the same level. And as we're evolving the specs, clarifying it, there will be tools that will be broken. We want to make sure that we help these tools reach a level of not brokenness again. So that's the gist of it in terms of status. Again, this sounds very small as a piece of text, in the range of 30, 40 lines, but you can't imagine the amount of work and time that went into these lines. Everything has been chiseled with a small chisel and then considered carefully many, many times. And there's probably a lot of issues still, but we're reaching a point where we can satisfy some of the most careful reviewers.
So where are we on the other, the other components? I know there's a name versus namespace discussion. Is that the next one that we take on, or?
I've started working on the namespace name. The version component, I think Martin had volunteered, or perhaps been volunteered. I don't think he started it yet. There may be, we've got some test related things that will need to be taken care of, but my understanding is the testing, the tests, the test instructions are not intended to be part of the 1.0. I'm not sure if that's been decided or not, but that's been discussed at least. But a clarification of encoding impacts how do you construct a properly constructed test, and then updating all the existing tests in the test suite, many of which do not comply even with the current spec, much less what we're clarifying.
So to me, the tests, there's two levels of tests. One, which is general purpose, ensuring that you can parse and unparse a Perl and ensure you can encode and decode correctly. And there's a second level, which is specific support for the rules for type. Weirdly enough, these are difficult to separate one from the other. What I absolutely want, so let's consider two things. First, the spec. What I want to have in the spec is the things we've discussed a bit earlier, which is to have, if we look at Steve's PR here, to have a definition of the spec of how do we define a Perl type. That means what is a namespace, which are the fields which are used, what are the rules for encoding, and what are the tests. Structure, not the tests themselves, but the structure. That's part of the spec. The second thing is, together with this, we need to have a correct, validated, updated test suite that also address all the Perl types. And that's going to take a while. And we need also to work with each of the libraries to help them implement these test suites, which means literally once we have the JSON set of tests and expected results, that's the test. So everybody understand what it looks like today. It looks like that. There's other format, but basically we're saying here, this is a Perl, this is a canonical Perl, and it's broken down into this component, and it's not invalid. We will need to have that ready for maybe not June, definitely, but by December, definitely. Do I hope and do I expect us to be finished also with, at the minimum, helping and reaching out to each and every tool implementers, advocating the test suite, pulling PRs so they can effectively run this test? Yes. And by the end of the year, I really expect that we will be able to accomplish all that. So that's the long answer. The short answer is, without the test, the spec is a bit moot. Big silence all of a sudden. Okay, I let you go ahead.
Code talks.
Excuse me?
I said code talks.
Yes, exactly. No, that's exactly the point. So that's pretty much it for today. So I think we're good unless there's other questions to bring up. Michael, anything you want to bring up extra?
Well, not really. I mean, I'm also I'm working on I think one other thing that is going into the plan is I think we need to, clearly in the next, if we're going for June 30, we need to figure out how to restructure the target documents that we have, which is where we put the pull request now to look closer like the structure of what we're actually producing, right? Because there's a mismatch there, not just the Perl type.
You mean with
just in general, right? The spec has
the formal Ecma document. Yeah, that's
not half of it is the formal Ecma document, but the other half of it is what are the supporting documents going to look like, right? So we've been working with a set of RST files in the Perl repo for a long time. They've been very helpful because obviously we've got great adoption, but we need to more formalize what's going to be the style, not just of the spec, what's in the spec, but what's not in the spec. Are we doing FAQs? How are we doing that? Is there going to be a Perl website? I mean, just, learning from CycloneDX, you need a whole infrastructure of information. And obviously, the GitHub is the core of it, but I would think we would want general public type website that also introduces people to it in a more, more marketing style, but you can look at that CycloneDX and
completely. Yeah.
So there's, anyway, just I think we have to have some target for that, and I don't think we have one right now. Of what does that look like? And again, I'm fine to emulate CycloneDX, but one of the good news items is whatever we come up with for the spec document itself should be quite a bit shorter than CycloneDX because we don't have 20 different types of SBOMs, right? We have 7 components, and so it should be simpler. But anyway, that's also, I think, part of our planning has to be migrating to what those things look like. I don't think having a website is a place. It's not a requirement for us to get the spec approved, but it's going to create a lot of trouble if the spec's out there and the information around it's not well organized for, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Which you want to put somewhat in the overview of the spec. There's an overview section for sure, but you can't cover it all. And
okay, so for reference, I'm pasting the link to the TC54 website, which is where we will have the spec live. But to your point, we need to have something which is slightly more structured and easier to less technical people for Perl itself. It could be on a GitHub page or whatever. And third thing you mentioned, which is the need to adopt something which is close to final format for the effective ECMA spec. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, given that I'd love for us to hit dates.
Yes.
I don't know complications of creating hosted websites, but could we suffice it for this? We could always. I assume that we could always provide additional contact points in there that originate from the top level README of the GitHub repo. But why don't we? Can we take advantage of GitHub pages?
Yeah, that's what I just said. Yes,
Oh,
definitely.
I'm sorry.
No. That's what I just said. I think we don't want anything complicated and complex. Little to zero infrastructure is good.
Because I mean, if you want to go in that direction, I would help someone create a static website using some tool like Docusource or something like that, 'cause I've done that a couple times already.
Okay, that's
Right.
cool. Docusource is nice. And I was trying to see, I think that we also have the packageurl.org website if need be. So we can have a very lightweight system where we have for instance, Docusource would be awesome, publish on GitHub page and just having a DNS point there so it looks even better.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be awesome because we could actually publish the Docusource site in the repo and then people could actually contribute content to it over time. We could actually activate a blog as well. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a better option. So no, that would be awesome. If it's not too much to ask and you want to take a stab at it, if you've already done that in the past, that will be much welcome. If you can't, we'll find a way, but that's
Right.
the way to go in all cases.
Well, that makes sense. Since CycloneDX is, one of the strengths is they're repeating the same, I think some of it uses GitHub pages, but in any case, it's repeating the same information in different forms. It's not creative in the sense of different information in different places. It's just how you're presenting it for an audience that's.
I think that maybe a separate informal session might be in order where we just discuss like the layout. I think we just in general understand what an index would look like and general structure, then throw something together. Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Great. I have a hard stop in 1 minute. So unless there's other things, Daniel, anything you want to bring up as a parting thought? John, Matt, everyone, thank you very much for joining this call.
Thank you. And
next. Have a wonderful day, wonderful weekend.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.